Hello and welcome back to Something Z, and welcome to What If Deku Had a Copy Quirk Part 2. Last time on the What If, Izuku was able to get into the hero course, and afterward, Class 1A had a Quirk apprehension test, which Mineta got last place. And on the second day, they were split into pairs, and they did a heroes vs villains exercise, and Ochako and Izuku were able to beat Ida and Bakugo at the last second. And the quirks Izuku currently has is 1. Fast reflexes, 2. Air blast, 3. Bakugo's explosions, and finally 4. A force field. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let's jump into the video in 3, 2, 1. So now it's the next day, and when it was the beginning of the school day, Aizawa walked into the room and he told the class that they will need to come up with the class rep and deputy rep. And when the class heard this, just about everyone in the class began to shout, saying that they should be chosen. But after a couple of minutes, Ida stands up and he tells them that they should do a vote in order to choose who should be the reps, which everyone agreed to. And when the votes were done, Izuku was chosen to be class rep, and Momo was chosen to be the deputy rep. So now we skip to lunch, and while Izuku, Ochako, and Ida were eating, Ochako asked Ida about his family, and it's then that the two learn about Ida's brother, and how he is the pro hero in Genium. But before they can go more into Ida's family, an alarm rang throughout the entire cafeteria, and when the alarm started, upperclassmen jumped out of their seats and ran to the exits. So seeing this, the three got out of their seats and they tried to get the attention of the upperclassmen, and after multiple attempts, they were finally able to get the attention of a junior. And he told them that the security system has been bypassed, and that's why the alarms are ringing. He then told them that they should hurry and get to the exits. So the three then began to run to the exit, but after it was too late, they noticed that the hallways were completely packed, so they couldn't move. And after a couple of minutes, Ida gets pushed against one of the glass walls, and when he looks outside, he notices his mic and eraser being pestered by news reporters. So he gets Ochako to touch his hand, and when she does, he begins to float, and he uses his engines to fly on top of an exit sign. And when he lands, he gets everyone's attention by shouting, and he began to shout saying that there aren't any villains. And hearing this, the crowd began to look out the windows, and when they did, they saw that Ida was right, which made them calm down. So now we skip to when after everyone got back to class, and when Izuku was sure everyone was back, he made an announcement saying that he was going to pass his title on to Ida, since he proved that he can be a better leader than he could. And when Izuku was done speaking, he asked if Ida would accept, and after a couple of seconds, Ida gives a nod. But unknown to everyone else in the school, a person was secretly inside, looking at files, finding out what All Might was doing, and how he was going to attend a field trip soon. So now we skip a couple of days, and when class started, Aizawa told the class to get dressed in their hero costumes, and to get onto the bus for their trip to the USJ. So now we skip to when the class gets to the USJ, and when the students walked out of the bus, the person they met was the pro hero 13, who gave them a speech about how their quirks can be used to save many lives, but it can also do the opposite, and if they're not careful, many people can die. And after the speech, they went inside, and after they got inside, Aizawa asked where All Might was, and in response, 13 held up a couple of her fingers. But before anything else could happen, the lights in the USJ began to flicker on and off, and a couple of seconds later, a portal opened up in the plaza of the USJ, and when it was fully formed, villains began to walk out of it, dozens after dozens. And the person leading the group was a villain with a hand mask, a giant bird monster, and a person surrounded by the same energy that the portal was made from. And when all the villains walked out, the portal closed. And Aizawa, seeing this, told 13 to watch over the students. Then he ran at the group of villains, and he began to fight them. Then the portal villain flew to the group of students, and when he got close, he noticed that All Might wasn't with them. Then without thinking, the portal villain said that their target wasn't there, and before he could say anything else, Kirishima, Bakugo, and Izuku jumped at the villain, and they tried to attack him. But when they tried to hit him, their attacks didn't do anything. And in response, the portal villain began to surround the students and the pro hero, and he began to teleport them away. And when Izuku could open his eyes again, he found himself in a giant body of water, at least 20 feet below the surface. But after a couple of seconds of Izuku looking around, he noticed that he wasn't alone. And a villain with a shark-like quirk began to swim around him, and after a couple of laps, he swam directly at Izuku, and he tried to bite him. But before he could bite him, Sue landed on the villain's head, and she jumped on him, flinging the villain a couple of feet down. Then Sue grabbed Izuku, and she dragged him onto a nearby boat. Then when Izuku was secured, she jumped back into the water to see if there was any more of their classmates. But after a minute, she gave up and she went back to the boat. Then the two tell each other about their quirks, and after about a minute, they come up with a plan, since they figured out that the villains don't know what their quirks are, since if they knew Sue's quirks, they wouldn't have teleported her to a water area. So Izuku then shot out a blast of air, to make the villains believe that he had an air manipulation quirk. Then once Izuku did this, a villain began to manipulate water into a giant hand, and he was about to destroy the boat, with a giant punch. But before the hand hit, Sue grabbed onto Izuku, and he put his hands to the floor of the ship. And when he was ready, he began to fire explosions, which flung the two into the sky. And when the hand hit the boat, the two were already out of the way, and while the villains were confused, Izuku put his hands to the sky, and he shot out a strong blast of air, which flung the two towards the group of villains at a fast speed. And when Izuku was close enough, he slapped the head of the villain that manipulated the water, and when he made contact with the villain, Izuku copied his quirk, and in exchange he got rid of his air blast. Izuku then fired another explosion, and he flung the two of them back to the sinking ship. and when they landed, Izuku began to manipulate the water into a giant fist, and the villains weren't able to escape in time before Izuku grabbed them, and when they were secured, Izuku threw the group of villains as hard as he could, which flung them to the other side of the body of water. Then Sue grabbed onto Izuku, and she swam the both of them to the plaza, and when they get to shore, they see Aizawa face first on the ground, with his head being held by the bird monster, while the hand guy was watching. But before anything else could happen, the portal villain went to the guy with the hand mask, and from what Izuku saw, he believed that something bad must have happened, since when the portal villain seemed to have told the hand mask villain something, he seemed to get very upset. And while the hand mask villain was having a temper tantrum, he turned his head and he saw Sue. Then before Sue could react, the hand villain ran to her, and he tried to reach out his hand to touch her head. But before he could reach, Izuku made a field, which surrounded the two of them, and when the hand villain made contact, he began to sap away Izuku's energy, since when he touched it, it made the field slowly disintegrate. But Izuku kept giving the field energy, repairing the field, and after a couple of seconds, the hand mask villain gave up, and he tells the bird monster to get Izuku. And when the monster heard this, it appeared in front of Izuku, and it hit the field, and the second it made contact, the barrier broke, since the attack was too strong for it. Then before Izuku could react, the bird monster grabbed onto his head, and seeing this, Sue tried to help by getting him free, but in response, the monster swatted Sue away, which made her fly a couple of feet away. Then the monster walked over to the hand villain, and he presented Izuku to him, and when Izuku was in front of him, the hand villain put his hand on Izuku's elbow, which made his elbow start to crumble away, and feeling this, Izuku knew that he needed to escape. So Izuku then grabbed the arm the villain was using to destroy his elbow, and he copied his quirk, and in exchange he got rid of his new quirk. And with decay, Izuku began to destroy Shigaraki's arm, and when Shigaraki saw what Izuku was doing, he backed away in confusion and pain for a couple of seconds, and using that time, Izuku tried to use decay on the monster's hand that was holding him, which made the monster's fingers start to crumble away, and after a couple of seconds, the Nomu lost his grip, just enough so Izuku could get his hands free. Then Izuku ran over to Aizawa and he tapped him with the back of his hand, copying his quirk, and in exchange he got rid of his fast reflexes, and by the time he did this, the Nomu's fingers were completely healed, and Izuku seeing this then put his hands behind him, and he began to fire explosions, launching him towards the villains. But before he made it to the two, Kurogiri flew in between Izuku and Shigaraki, and he made a portal, which made Shigaraki put his hand on Izuku's face. But before Shigaraki made contact, Izuku saw the hand, and he kept his eyes open while Shigaraki's hand was over his face, and he cancelled out his quirk, making it so nothing happened. And seeing this, Shigaraki let go and he got his hand out of the portal Kurogiri just made. He then told Nomu to get Izuku, and in a blink of an eye, the bird monster appeared right in front of Izuku, and before Izuku could do anything, the monster punched Izuku as hard as it could, launching him around 20 feet away, and when Izuku got up, he was badly injured, but he was still strong enough to stand, and he was about to run back to the group of villains. But before he could, the front doors of the USJ burst open, and hearing this, the group of people in the plaza turned their heads towards the doorway, and when they did, they saw All Might, who ran to the plaza and he picked up Aizawa, Sue, and Izuku, and he brings them a couple of feet away. He then tells Izuku and Sue, who was also injured, to get Aizawa out of the way, and after he told them that, All Might ran back to the villains to fight them, and after a couple of minutes of the two carrying Aizawa, Izuku decided that he needed to help fight the villains, so he dropped Aizawa's legs and he ran back to the plaza. And when he got to the plaza, All Might was slowly sinking into a portal, while holding Nomu in a suplex, and Bakugo and Kirishima were currently holding the portal villain down, while Todoroki was freezing the Nomu's right leg. And seeing all this, Shigaraki shouted for Nomu to get up, and to get Kurogiri, and hearing this, the Nomu broke free from the ice, and when it was free, its legs were covered with frostbite, but it instantly healed itself, and within a couple of seconds, the Nomu's leg was fully healed, and when it was ready, it ran at Bakugo trying to get Kurogiri, but before it could get to Bakugo, Bakugo seemed to have teleported right next to Izuku, and when everyone looks to see where Bakugo was, they see All Might. Then All Might and Nomu ran at each other, and when they collided, they began to punch each other, exchanging blows, and after around 299 punches, Nomu starts to get flung into the air, and with one final punch with all of his energy, All Might launches the Nomu through the roof of the USJ, and after this, All Might tells Shigaraki that he was defeated, and that he should give up now, or he tells them that he will beat them up, while in actuality, All Might was weakened from fighting Nomu, and he was barely able to keep up his form. And seeing this, Kurogiri told Shigaraki that All Might was weakened, and that this would be a good time to attack. And hearing this, Shigaraki began to run at All Might, but before he could get to him, Shigaraki got shot multiple times in his arms and legs, and when everyone sees this, they look at where the gunshots came from, which was the front doors, and when they do, they see the rest of the teachers of UA, and seeing this, Shigaraki tells Kurogiri to get them out of there, so as quick as they could, they left via a portal. But before they left, Shigaraki said that this wasn't the end of the league, and that they will come back to attack again, and once he was done saying that, the portal closed. So now it's been hours since the attack, and everyone is back at the campus, and since All Might and Izuku were the only ones was truly injured besides Aizawa, who was taken to the hospital. They were in Recovery Girl's office, and now Izuku has gloves that protect him from decaying anything or anyone in the room. And when it was time for Izuku to be released from the infirmary, Izuku tapped with the back of his hand, and he copied her quirk, getting rid of decay. And after he copied it, he left to go home. And when he got to the front gates, he saw two people waiting for him, which were Ochako and Ida. And once he got to them, they began to walk home. And this is where I'm going to leave the what if. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time on Something Z.